But in a situation where you find that they look like the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. But in a situation where you find that they look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. But in a situation where you find that they look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. But in a situation where you find that they look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, there you have it. Now we will begin to look at the stories that made the headlines today, and we have in the studio Sunday Michael, Deputy Business Editor. Good morning, and it's good to have you join us again.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here again.
All right, great. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Here you would find new heads of petroleum agencies resume today. Recall that there is the scrapping of the different petroleum agencies, as a result of the I would say the signing of the Petroleum Industry Act into law. You also, okay, that's, I'm looking at okay, I'm right. Troops kill 50 bandits in Kaduna. You'd also find anxiety as NSAS promoters insist on memorial protest. That's on page 6 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The lead story will interest you. It's about residents alleging extortion as Mambila Power Project execution drags. The writer there says how poor viability review downscaled project to 1,525 megawatts from 3,050. Also, you'd see over 3 billion budgeted for survey compensation in 11 years. FG to spend 650 million on project next year. If you grab a copy of the Daily Trust newspaper, you'll find that on page 5. And you can also watch a documentary done on that on Trust TV. The trailer has been on for quite some time now, and today we'll be airing the investigative report that we did on that Mambila project. Is going to be airing at about 11 a.m. and you can watch that, of course, on Star Times channel 164, and is also free to air. The picture there shows you the procession of Maulud yesterday. Also expectations as Turkish President Erdogan visits Nigeria. APC crisis, Shekarau Abe unveil excos in Kano, Rivers. New heads of petroleum agencies resume today. That's a story that is also generating some conversations. We'll be looking at that later on the program. And that's that on the Daily Trust today.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the stories on the Punch newspaper this morning. You'd find on page 17, 264 million Nigerians. Others undemolished, says IMF. And on page 8, you'd find new amendment empowers INEC to use electronic voting machines. That's according to the Senate. And on page 17, you'd find strike threat. NNPC to rehabilitate 16 roads with 621 billion naira. And on page 2, you'd find Defense Headquarters seeks nod to crush bandits with Tucano jets, laments U.S. condition. And then the big story there, you'll see hashtag NSAS anniversary. Police occupy Lekki tollgate. Others Activists set for protest. And a writer is saying protesters, security agents may clash as youth insist on commemorative rally. You also see organizers reject indoor anniversary to converge under bridges, hold processions. Police deploy massive operatives in Federal Capital Territory's strategic locations. And you'd also find on page 9, PCN decries exodus of Nigerian pharmacists to Canada. Collapsed building kills Lagos residents, 15 rescued, structure pulled down. And you'll find on page 12, APC, PDP exchange harsh words on Fayemi's 3-year performance. These are some of the stories you'd find on the Punch newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Nation newspaper this morning. Gunmen invade meeting venue, kill 2 monarchs. You would see beside that, PDP governors wade in battle for deputy chair. That's South. You'd find that on page 25 of the Nation newspaper. The next, inflation remains big threat to businesses, to business growth. You also see EFCC probe Total Nigeria retires top executive. The other stories there, 24 states shun financial autonomy for judiciary. Recall that there is this executive order issued by the president, Executive Order 10, mandating government at all levels to enforce the autonomy for judiciary. But again, we've seen that hitting the rocks for some reason. In 24 states yet to, ensure the implementation of that. You'd see the lead story also saying #EndSARS, why protest is unnecessary by Sanwo-Olu. The writers there, please in show of force, lock down Lekki toll gate again. That some people will say, well, that looks like an intimidation, of stopping people from exercising their legitimate right. Well, that's that on the Nation newspaper this morning.
Okay, let's take a look at The Guardian this morning. It looks like most of the papers are on to the EndSARS today. It's the #EndSARS, hope betrayed a year after. And you'd also see the big headline stating #EndSARS, tension in Lagos over 1-year memorial. Police only indoor virtual events will be allowed. You'd also see police lack powers to ban protest, Falana insists. Protesters to storm Lekki toll gate in car procession. No right-thinking Nigerian would join EndSARS protest. That's according to the defense headquarters. And security operatives take over toll gate ahead of memorial. Sanwo-Olu maintains Nigerian youth have reasons, insists on police reform. I think these are some of the stories on the Guardian newspaper this morning.
All right, around the Tribune newspaper this morning, at the very top, you'd find the first story there saying, special report, FG loses revenue, importers grown as $3.1 billion e-customs project suffers setback. Gunmen kill 2 during invasion of traditional rulers meeting in Imo. Below the nameplate, the lead story says, EndSARS anniversary, police on alert, warn against street protest. You'd find that on page 2 of the Tribune newspaper. Beside the pictorial, bandits killed 43 in Sokoto market attack. That's according to the governor, Bello Tambol in particular. You'd see also political elite deliberately creating fault lines with ethnic, religious, communal identities. That's according to the former chair of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmoud Jega. You'd find that another story below that saying 15 rescued, 1 killed as 2-story building collapses in Ikorodu These are some of the major stories on the Tribune this morning. Let's take a look at the stories again in depth. The lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper talking about the Mambila project. This is a project that we've heard about for as far as I can remember. Some said it's a project that has been on for, the conversation about that project has been on for more than 40 years. And now in the last 11 years, some monies have been released with very little to show for it. What's your, what do we know so far about this, story?
What we know is it's appalling, to say the least. To think that this project has featured in almost every presidential campaign of how the promises from what we stand to harness or harvest from that project can change the fortune of this country or the narrative of power in this country. And then at this material point in time, on the eve of elections, we are beginning to learn that practically there is nothing on ground. It diminishes whatever is left of your confidence about what the politicians can do for this country. And then when you begin to hear some of the terrible narratives about how the same government officials have gone about extorting locals because they promised them that if you part with XYZ money, we will have your name on the compensation list. The same compensation list where the government has spent well over 3 billion in 11 years, and yet the people had received no dime. You just begin to wonder whether we even understand what we are doing to ourselves as a country. It's terrible, and I hope Nigerians would find time to keep an appointment with Trust TV by 11 a.m. this morning to catch a full glimpse, real time, what's this pathetic narrative.
Okay, now it states here that federal government plans to spend 650 million on projects next year. With this, development, what does this say?
This is
about
150 million. They keep claiming is also part of that whole conversation around compensation and right of way. People have existed there from time immemorial. They have farmlands around those trajectories. You can't wake up one morning and ask them to relocate away from their means of livelihood without at least providing an alternative. The problem then is who is handling this? How are they handling this? Are they sitting back in Abuja and determining who gets what and how? Or are they working with the community, even though the community are denied any knowledge of how these compensations are happening? So if this government really do want to make progress on this project, it has to clear this mess. It's a bunch of mess that has been created on its part, and it has the capacity to truncate what is already truncated anyway, to further truncate this dream that has been on the pipeline for 40 years.
All right, then. Quite a number of stories here to look at. The issue about the NSAS protest. It's all over the papers this morning, and we are seeing that promoters insist that there will be a protest. But again, we are seeing that the police and other security forces are, doing what they consider show of force. Do you think that this is in the right direction or an attempt to intimidate protesters?
You see, my perspective is we can't pretend to be in a democracy. In other words, we cannot say we are in a democracy and not allow democratic tenets to take full roots. Protests or processions are part of our fundamental right. At any rate, they are not protesting against just anything. They have a valid reason to protest. It's been 1 year. The question we ask ourselves is, what has happened to all those laudable promises that the government made when this protest started? Oh, we'll reform the police, we are coming up with SWAT. Have you seen SWAT? I don't know where they are. They woke up and said, we are going to reform the attitude of the police. It's barely 3-4 days ago we saw another police guy brutally malhandling travelers on the Okene axis. You and I know that in the last 1 year we have seen a dozen of those videos on the Lagos Benin Shagam Expressway. We have seen it in Okene. We have seen it on the Abuja Kaduna Highway. We have seen it on the Port Harcourt Onitsha Enugu Express Highway. We have seen it on the Asaba Benin Highway. And so the question really is it just a lip service from people in Abuja to pacify us, or there are indeed real efforts to reform? The other question is, over 20 people are still in detention over that protest. You didn't charge them to court. You're just holding on to them extrajudicially. Does it suggest that we have learned anything? So there have been commissions set up everywhere. Where are the reports of the commission? You would think the commission would have come up with a report long before now, and we would have picked very valuable insights about things we can do differently to forestall this kind of attack in the future. I was somewhere in England when the last protest happened around, is it 2014 or 2013, that had destructions around major black neighborhoods. The commission came out with a recommendation to say these destructions were possible because there were massive exclusion of young people. More and more people felt like they had no stake in society. And they had to say, what can we do differently? Because it's lay credence to the fact that an idle mind is indeed the devil's workshop. What can we do differently? You cannot do nothing and expect something.
Now, some of the arguments that have been put forward is that the aftermath of the EndSARS, or I would say the EndSARS protest itself, was hijacked by hoodlums, that led to extortion, vandalization, and looting, in some parts of the country and all of that. So, which is why the government is saying, no, there will not be EndSARS protests. Is that justified?
So in journalism, you say nothing exists in a vacuum. The government created the vacuum by not showing sincerity of purpose in that conversation with young people. They took them for granted until that whole protest took a life of its own. It started in piecemeal. What did we do to engage? We just felt that when these boys get hungry and tired, beaten by the sun, they will probably freeze out. And then other interests who saw that the government was not coming in took charge. At any rate, we saw that some of the hoodlums they are talking about were also government sponsored. They came in with government vehicles. They are on record, directing talks to hit certain places, so they cannot completely isolate themselves from whatever narratives that they are putting out there. But the question really was, if they are taking people seriously, it probably wouldn't have lasted. If you have shown real cause that reforms were, you and I can ask ourselves, every time those videos make it to the airwaves about maltreatment by police officers, you hear questions like the IG has directed that XYZ be arrested, or in fact that they have been arrested and they will be tried and justice will be meted, and that is the end of the story. So the question really is, have you and I seen practical evidence that justice have been meted out to deter even their own members from further doing the same? You recall only a couple of weeks ago, we ran a report showing how your items are stolen, you approach the police, and what you end up with is even more extortion. How they ask you to pay XYZ amount of money before they even commence investigation, commercializing the whole act of investigation that is supposed to be available for you for free as a remediation for an unjust action that had been meted against you by criminal elements in society. But what does our law enforcement do? They further compound your nemesis. So does that suggest in any way that there had been any kind of reform? These are the questions that these kind of memorials are meant to ask. That the things we demanded 1 year ago seem not to have been attended to, seem to have been shoved under the carpet, or rather that you are not taking it as serious as we think. What I would have thought is that on the eve of this conversation, even the government would have designed a platform to have invited these people into a more serious conversation and guide them and have a conversation around how can we have a peaceful protest to mark this day and recall that once upon a time we came out to ask for ABC and XYZ, and what can we do to move on?
Okay.
Now, Okay. Very good.
Talking about justice, being served. Yesterday, the Lagos panel concluded its sitting, and it said it's awarded 410 million to 70 victims. Well, some will say we've not seen the victims and we don't know what's happening. What are your thoughts about all of
Audio
these panels being
victims.
set up?
Some would say audio victims. You would think, we all know the power of the media. If you had done this much, we should be seeing them in the media. We should be putting a face to the beneficiaries. And these victims are not just, remember, they are not just people on the side of the protest. They're also families of the policemen we lost who were on the street trying to restore calm. They are also victims. So the question really is, can we put a face to them? It's like every time we come up and we say 50 die. And so 50, we reduce them to numbers. Those are heads of families. Those are breadwinners. Those are nursing mothers. So they are a name. They exist somewhere. It would have made sense if we identify who these persons are, and one or two persons can attest, give a testimonial of how indeed this benefit had gotten to them, and then we can begin to talk about healing from that place. It's not just enough to reel out numbers and think when people hear these things, they become satisfied and they move on.
Now, others are saying, well, the panels, for instance, have a duration of 6 months. The Lagos panel, for instance, went on break for about that same period, 6 months, only to resume and then end the whole process and all of that. What does that tell, about the whole processes? In fact, some of the panels are yet to even submit their reports.
So it tells you, it builds into all of the narratives why people don't feel any sense of satisfaction from what the government has referred to as interventions. And let us not make mistakes about it. You don't quell an agitation by force. The guys who are involved, first of all, most of them are jobless. They are innovative. With the help of the social media, they can organize themselves in ways that are far more sophisticated than the police people just showing up and keeping vigil in a spot. I mean, today you are hearing that they will do a car convoy. So how do you stop the 1,000 cars from protesting? You know what? They will cause a mess in Lagos today, and you can begin to imagine what the traffic situation will be. You can begin to imagine the cost on businesses, how that whole economic sabotage can impact the economy of the country, because that's the heartbeat of commercial activities in Nigeria. So you come up with one way to do something, they diverse another means of doing things. So that is why I think this whole hide and seek, as I choose to look at it.
In fact, I recall that even when the government came out to make the promises that they did to look into the issues, set up panel, the protesters were reluctant about leaving the streets.
Yes.
Because of these same issues that, look, if we leave the streets, we are not going to see the actions that we are demanding. And lo and behold, it's true, And so, would you say that this is, further widening the trust deficit, that has been lacking?
You basically have captured it perfectly. That trust deficit had continued to widen. This government, including previous government, have been, or rather the actions of previous government leading into this government have created a very grave trust deficit, and it continues to widen. Every time, especially when you come up to say things, from day one, you are not committed to. Some of the reforms that these people have talked about really doesn't even have to do with giving them anything. We just want the police to change their attitude. How is that difficult? How the average Nigerian really doesn't want to have anything to do with the police? Really? If you have an issue with somebody that will require some kind of intervention, if you think of what it will cost you to approach the police, you would rather just bear the cost, bear the brunt, and walk away.
Right.
Because what they do every time you approach them is complicate your situation. How is asking for that kind of reform such a big thing? They are not asking you to give them stipends. So it's about having an institution that works for us. It's about having the confidence to approach an institution and having the confidence to say, because I have taken this step, I will get justice. Several people have complaints about what is supposed to be a simple thing becoming very complex simply because you introduce law enforcement into it. These are the kind of reforms that people are asking about. Do you know how sometimes you are driving in the night and the moment you sight a police, you become worried rather than being calm?
Peace, yes.
It's terrible. Well, many would say the NSAS protest is a game changer for the Nigerian youth. Do you think we hope to see that kind of energy in 2023 as we go to the polls?
Whilst I agree to an extent, we are still lacking the kind of leadership that would transcend into that kind of game-changing movement. And I say it is true because everywhere where we see good governance, it is not because the politician wants to give the people anything good. They are really not interested in your welfare, I'm sorry to say. Everywhere we have seen good governance, in recent times in Asia, in the Middle East, in the West, is because of active citizenry.
Right.
It's people knowing their right and asking for it and insisting on it. What the average Asian or Westerner would not take from its government, you give it to us, we swallow it as if nothing has happened. You push people to the wall, they break the wall and continue to move back. So you begin to wonder, where is our elastic limit? But what the NSAS did was, if we indeed want to mobilize our capacity as young people, it is possible. These tools are there, they are not expensive. The whole mobilization happened over Twitter and Facebook and WhatsApp. So if we want to mobilize for a good cause, it is really not difficult. And most importantly, we also have the numbers. You are talking about 60 million youth. The president barely won 15 million votes, youth inclusive, to be in power. Do you know what we can do with an active, well-mobilized, well-sensitized 30 million youth votes in this country? It would change the narrative. But the question is, are we willing to do that? I think we spend more time doing Z-World, Big Brother Nigeria, and discussing other frivolities than rather do things that affect our future.
All right. Now, I think we have a clip of, the NSAS protest from last year. We'll do a throwback to just, take a look at some of the things that happened, during that protest. Take a look at this.
We are journalists.
Answers now! Answers now!
Well, that's a video of, the events that happened during the NSAS protest. Well, today, 20th of October, marks 1 year since the hashtag NSAS protest. What is the aftermath of the protest? Let's take a look at what we know so far.
Yeah, the national protest made the following demands. 1, immediate release of all arrested protesters. 2nd, justice for all deceased victims of police brutality and appropriate compensations for their families. 3rd, setting up an independent body to oversee the investigation and prosecution of all reported police misconduct within the period of 10 days. And then 4thly, carrying out psychological evaluation and retaining of all disbanded SARS operatives before they can be deployed, and that this should be verified by an independent body. And then the 5th recommendation, or I would say the demand, is that government should increase police salary and they should adequately compensate for protecting lives and property of the citizens. These are some of the demands that were made.
Now, with the proceedings, the Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry into the NSAS Lekki shooting came to an end on Monday, with the panel awarding 148.2 million as compensation to 23 victims of police brutality. Now, the panel had previously awarded a total of 262 million as compensation to 47 petitioners. With the new compensations, a total of 410.2 million had been given to 70 petitioners as compensation. The panel also said it will submit its findings, which include individual petitions on the incident, to the state government and recommend compensation to the petitioners. 1 year on, reports reveal that there is heavy police presence on the streets of Lagos.
Now let's take a look at the panels set up in other states. In Enugu State, the 8-man judicial panel of inquiry on police brutality and related cases has not concluded its assignment. As of July, the panel received about 145 petitions, out of which 45 had either been adopted conclusively or referred to the administrative panel of inquiry arising from the NSAS protest.
The Christopher Ubra-led panel of inquiry on police brutality in Taraba State has awarded a total of 509 million to 42 victims of police brutality. The panel awarded 15 million each to those who suffered permanent incapacitation in the hands of the police, while those who were unlawfully arrested, tortured, detained or extorted were awarded between 3 and 8 million each, depending on the gravity of the brutality. However, the panel has not been able to tidy up its report due to paucity of funds. As such, none of the victims has gotten the compensation.
The Abia State #NSAS Judicial Panel of Inquiry has completed public sitting, and members sat every Tuesday and Wednesday throughout the duration of the assignment and attended to 86 petitions filed before them. And of course, the Imo State panel submitted report recommended 770.9 million as compensation. And in Imo State, the judicial panel headed by Justice Florence Duroha Igwe sat between November 3rd, 2021 and May 4th, 2021. The chairman recently submitted the report of the panel to Governor Hope Uzodinma, recommending that 770,985,800 million naira should be paid to victims of police brutality in the state as compensation. The panel received a total of 145 petitions and 9 memoranda. 45 of the petitions were related to death, while 9 petitions had to do with permanent disability. 14 petitions were struck out for want of jurisdiction. 3 were struck out for being sub judice, while 18 others were struck out for various reasons. 8 petitions were dismissed, 2 recommended for apology, while 102 were successfully heard.
Well, in Ekiti State, the Judicial Panel of Inquiry into Human Rights Violation by Police Officers received a total of 85 petitions between November 2nd, 2020 and December 4th, 2020. Out of these petitions, the panel recommended that 50 of the petitioners who suffered various forms of abuse ranging from loss of life to physical injury, trauma and loss of property be compensated. The panel struck out 24 cases that it considered inadmissible for lack of jurisdiction or lack of diligent prosecution.
Now, Ondo State Governor Oluwarotimi Akeredolu set up a judicial panel of inquiry to investigate allegations of police brutality and other matters in the state. Although the panel submitted its report to the state government in May, the victims who were able to prove their cases are yet to receive their various compensations recommended by the panel.
In Osun State, Governor Boyega Ayetola inaugurated the panel of inquiry on police brutality, human rights violations and related extrajudiciary killings on October 23, 2020. Justice Akin Oladimeji, the head of the 12-man panel, its chairman, Justice Oladimeji, had revealed that it entertained 34 petitions. Out of the 34 petitions, 11 of them were struck out due to incompetence or lack of diligent prosecution. In the other 23 cases, parties gave evidence in them, and counsel representing the parties to all cases have been concluded.
So, well, with all of the recommendations that we've seen, from the report, we have seen now one, just like we've said earlier, paucity of funds is even stopping some states like Taraba from filing, their own report. And aside from all of that, one thing that I did not see is the arrests that have been made of police officers. How many police officers have been arrested and how many have been convicted, from these investigations of the panel? That is not, we can't find that anywhere.
That's inclusive of the demands that were made. You just needed to even be checking those demands as you were mentioning them. They just come off as standing the moment you mention them, including what is supposed to be an increase in the welfare of the police itself. So it's a pathetic case, and you just need to look at or rather review some of the things you have said to understand why these people chose to mark an anniversary. If they had seen some serious progress being made, I doubt they would have been talking of an anniversary in the manner of going to the street rather than what more can we do? How else can we better the circumstances? So it's for Lagos, it's even serious about it, but it took a whopping 1 year to do. And so you begin to imagine, like we said from the beginning, whether the intents were right, whether they were serious about indeed reforming the police for the good of even the police themselves and the people, because the conditions under which some of those policemen serve is pathetic, and you cannot expect somebody who serve under such unwholesome circumstances to in any way behave civil to the persons he is supposed to protect. It's difficult. It's a mismatch, really.
It's appalling. Recently, during my trip, I'll just cite this as an example. During my trip, to Lagos, you see the way sometimes even security officials, some of them, the way they behave, you wonder whether to even relate with an Agbero or with them, which one is even much better, and sometimes you see some elements of some kind of connivance, between even the Agberos and some of the, security officials and all of that.
Absolutely. Talking about that, I was standing at the point also in Lagos at the weekend, and you know what the policeman did? They deliberately vandalized the no U-turn sign and went and hid themselves a few miles away from where they expect that the lack of sign would have led you to drive the wrong way. And the moment you negotiate that turn, about 5 or 6 of them show up to clown down on you, and there is nothing you say in this world that will save you. And the argument is there is no U-turn. I say, but there has always been. And the moment they catch you, they go and show you the vandalized pole, on the floor. You know, so you begin to wonder how you were supposed to see something on the floor, stopping you from making a U-turn at a point. You know, so I was around that place, I had observed it, and I was saying to myself, what is leading to this fracas? Until they catch, and I observed carefully how they had to lead somewhere. They said, come and read it, see, it's here. It's you people that drove over this thing and vandalized it, but everybody should know that this place is a no U-turn zone. So the question really is, are you interested in people not committing the crime by guiding them on the path of what is right, or rather enjoy the act of leading people, as it were, into the crime so that you can extort them? It's unfortunate.
It's really sad.
Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We have been speaking to Sunday Michael, Deputy Business Editor, Daily Trust.
When the situation where you find that they look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that. When the situation where you find that they look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.